left front tire of my patrol car was dangling 2 full feet above the asphalt. Behind my right shoulder, a 20-foot drop into an open field. Under me, 2.5 tons of Ford, balanced on a bank of frozen snow. And every breath I took, every tiny shift of my weight, I could feel her inch backward. I was 6 months out of the academy. Tonight on Into the Gray, I want to tell you about the 2 times a tow truck driver saved my bacon. No pun intended. Same driver, same truck, less than a week apart. Every state trooper remembers their first year on the road. You've got the badge, the gun, and a heavy dose of rookie optimism. But no amount of academy training prepares you for what happens when Mother Nature decides to test you. For me, one such test came in March of 1994, when the infamous storm of the century buried the state under several feet of snow. At the time, I was living 10 miles outside of town, and by the time the National Guard got to me on that shift to dig me out, my shift was long over. My supervisor gave me the easiest order of my career. Stay put. Let them pick up the next unit. Come out in the morning. Yes, sir. I went to sleep that night knowing I had a fight waiting for me in the morning, though. Sure enough, the county plow had left a frozen wall of snow across the mouth of my driveway during the night. I backed my patrol car, a 1991 Ford Crown Victoria LTD, to the back of my driveway, and I slammed the pedal to the floor. She burst through that snowbank like a battering ram, fishtailed onto the 2-lane road, and I wrestled her straight. For 2 glorious miles, I thought I'd won. Then came the incline, a gentle, harmless hill I'd driven 100 times. Halfway up, the rear-wheel drive lost traction. I let off the gas and pumped the brakes, but old Gray ignored me completely. She started sliding backward, and worse, sliding sideways toward the shoulder. I looked to my right and saw nothing but that steep drop into the field below. I stomped the gas. Nothing. I wrenched the wheel. Futile. Out of options, I stood on the brake pedal with both feet, pushing with every ounce of weight I had. With a sickening metallic grind, the cruiser stopped sliding. And that's where you found me at the top of this episode. The right rear tire had slipped over the edge, bottoming the frame out on a hardened bank of packed snow. The left front tire hung in the open air. I sat frozen, barely breathing, without making any sudden movements, and I reached for the radio mic. As bad as I hated to, I told dispatch, I'm stuck near Highway 330 and 1054. I'm over an embankment, and I'm unable to direct traffic. Unable to direct traffic. You learn to keep it professional, even when your heart is hammering through your vest. As luck would have it, a local tow truck operator lived only 5 miles away from me. Within a short time, yellow strobes pierced the whiteout. The driver, Kenny, hopped out, took one look at old Gray teetering over that edge, and gave me a look that said, "You're lucky to be alive." He set his wheel chocks on the sheet of ice, nearly falling twice. He dragged a heavy steel cable over and hooked it to my front undercarriage. The cable went taut. I felt that floating front tire begin to lower back toward the asphalt. I let out a massive sigh of relief. Well, that relief lasted about 2 seconds. The wheel chocks under the heavy wrecker snapped loose on the ice. The tow truck then began sliding toward my car. The tension went out of the cable, and old Gray's nose popped right back up into the air. Kenny spun around, eyes wide, and screamed over the engine noise. "Hold that brake!" He scrambled back into his cab, slammed his own brakes, and stopped his slide just as the steel cable snapped tight with a violent twang. Then he jumped out, kicked extra chocks under his tires, braced his rig, and slowly winched my 2.5-ton sleigh back onto solid ground. When I stepped out and walked to the edge of that embankment, my stomach dropped. If that cable had snapped when his truck slid, old Gray would have rolled down that drop and landed flat on her roof with me in it. The driver wiped his brow and said he was heading into town to fuel up. He suggested I follow right behind him, and I didn't argue. Now, you'd think a moment like that would be a once-in-a-career event, but in law enforcement, lightning doesn't strike just twice. Sometimes it uses the same tow truck. Less than a week later, the snow was beginning to melt. The temperature had spiked, and a massive, rapid thaw was in place. I was on duty on a dark winter evening when a call came in. Routine, non-injury crash on a narrow, rural county road. As I crested a long hill, I could see the stranded motorist's hazard lights flashing at the top of the opposite ridge. To get to him, I just had to cross a low-water bridge at the bottom of the valley. A simple concrete slab over a small creek with some drainage tubes underneath. I started down the hill, tapping my brakes. The road got progressively icier. I slowed even more, aiming to hit that concrete bridge carefully. Only, I couldn't find the bridge. I slid to a halt right where the crossing should have been, and my brain struggled to process what I was looking at. The concrete slab I knew was there wasn't. The road just ended, dissolving into a churning black torrent. The thaw had turned that little creek into a raging monster. The bridge was buried under at least 2 feet of roaring, swift water. Chunks of ice, tree limbs, debris, all of it sweeping past in the dark with a deafening roar. I had stopped mere feet from the edge. As little experience as I had, naively I wondered if I could make it through. As I sat there, the floodwater started creeping up the road toward my front bumper. I slammed the Ford into reverse and hit the gas. The rear tires just spun on the ice. I couldn't go forward into the water. I couldn't back up the slope. I was trapped in a 2.5-ton gray sinking box. As I sat there listening to the water slap against the front of my cruiser, I had a grim thought. I was about to become the skipper of a gray boat. Desperate, I cracked my door, pulled a handful of magnesium road flares from the trunk, lit them, and set them directly behind my rear tires, praying the heat would melt through the ice down to the pavement. It was a classic rookie idea, born of pure adrenaline. The ice was too thick, though, and the water was coming faster than it was melting. I grabbed the mic. Once again, with regret, I said, "Dispatch, I'm in a bad spot. The low water bridge isn't there anymore. I've tried using flares to melt the ice behind my tires, but the water's rising fast. It's getting up over the nose of my cruiser. If a tow service doesn't get here soon, this SP is going to be the SS Minnow." Dispatch came back immediately. 10-4. I'll advise him to step it up. I appreciate that. And tell him the hill is pure ice. Have him stop at the top as soon as he sees my blue lights. I'll walk up to him. For 20 agonizing minutes, I watched that muddy brown water climb my grill and begin spilling over my hood. Then, at the crest of the hill, yellow strobes flashed through the trees. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lord." The wrecker stopped at the top of the ridge, and the driver stepped out. And sure enough, it was Kenny, the same man who had pulled me off that embankment a few days earlier. He picked his way down the hill on foot, carrying an extra length of winch cable. He handed me the hook end, pointed at the undercarriage, and told me where to lock it in. I sprinted back down the hill, nearly wiping out a couple of times. The freezing water was churning now. I dropped into the icy slush behind the rear bumper, slammed that heavy steel hook into place, and flashed my flashlight up the hill at Kenny. The cable went taut, engine roaring. The wrecker hauled Old Gray backward, up the hill, out of the jaws of the flood. When we finally stopped in a safe zone, I looked back down. The spot where I'd set those road flares minutes earlier was underwater. I thanked the wrecker driver again for saving my hide, for the second time in a week. I took the long detour around the valley to the original crash call. When I pulled up, the motorist who'd called it in looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Trooper," he said, "I watched you go down that hill from across the valley. I just knew I was about to watch you get washed away." Cell phones were almost non-existent back then. He'd had to walk to a nearby farmhouse just to call in his fender bender. He had no way to warn anyone that the bridge was gone, that a trap was sitting at the bottom of the hill in the dark. All I could do was watch my headlights drop into the valley and pray. Driving back home that night, the adrenaline finally faded, and it left behind a cold, heavy realization. Twice in a week, the road itself had tried to do me in. And twice, the only thing standing between me and the bottom of a ravine or a rushing creek bed was a stranger with a winch who got there in time. The training, the badge, and 2.5 tons of Detroit steel, none of it saved me. Kenny did. I never worked a weather call the same way again. From that night on, I treated every storm like it was armed. Years later, transportation departments across the country launched that famous safety campaign, "Turn around, don't drown." 4 words on a yellow sign. Every time I pass one, I don't think about public service announcements. I think about a freezing night in 1994, a flooded creek roaring in the dark, a Crown Victoria nicknamed Old Gray, who spent one very long night auditioning as the SS Minnow, and a tow truck driver I never got to properly thank. He showed up twice within a few days, and twice he pulled me back from the edge. Turn around, don't drown. It's a slogan on a sign. But for me, it'll always sound like a winch cable snapping tight in the dark. The best sound I had ever heard at that time. Thank you for stepping into the gray with me. I'll see you a little further down the road.